Alright, everybody, welcome to another week. Oh, one second. There we go. Gotta make sure we're recording this. Alright, everyone, welcome to another week of Completion Critiques here on the Game Wisdom channel. We are going to be taking a look at, I guess this is the Battle of the Action Roguelikes this week with Spelunky and Dead Cells. This is also the surefire way to annoy any traditional roguelike fans. To mention that these two are considered roguelikes in some capacity. But the reason why I chose these two, besides Dead Cells winning the vote from our Patreon, is that they both represent some of the major changes and shifts of roguelike design, especially Spelunky. I featured it in 20th Central Game Society as well as Game Design Deep Dive Roguelikes. That Spelunky was probably one of the first, if not the first, of the action roguelikes that were built heavily on its core gameplay loop, which was then expanded into the procedural generation. It is a game that has been played quite a bit, and probably one of the more recognizable names in the indie space. Now, of course, we did play through Spelunky 2 on stream, and there's definitely a lot more divisiveness over the second one. But the first game still remains as one of the more fascinating examples of the action roguelike genre. But how well did people actually play through this one? Again, this is a game that is now just over 8 years old. And we'll see if it did retain people all the way through. Now, Spelunky is a very challenging game. And this is one that, as you can see right off the bat, that the churn is certainly real. What is kind of surprising is that 25% of the player base didn't even make it through the tutorial of the game. And unfortunately, that is to be expected when we have games of very high skill levels. That they're going to weed out a lot of the player base probably within the first 15 to 20 minutes. We've seen this with Doom, with Dark Souls, and we're seeing this with Spelunky, and we'll probably see this with Dead Cells in the coming minutes. But with Spelunky itself, it is so much a platformer first, a roguelike second, that for the time, it really did, and probably still to this day, it is one of the harder platformers to play. And you really need to come into the game with a high level of skill involving it. Because if you don't have it, the rogue elements of this game, or the procedural elements, the items, they're not going to help you. And it's why this is another really good example of a game that has very subjective difficulty. That it's really dependent on who you are versus the game itself. The game is still on the harder side, and there are people out there who have probably spent 100 plus hours and maybe never have finished the game. And I think I finished it in about 50 hours, or maybe a little bit less than that, and that's going all the way to hell as well. But as we can see here, and once I just want to make sure that we are in fact streaming. Yep, we are. Alright, but as we can see, there is certainly some churn at the start here. Now, the thing about Spelunky that makes it very hard in order to gauge in terms of length is that if you're good at this game, you could probably beat it all the way in, what would we say, about an hour? Maybe a little bit more than that if we're going to hell. So, if you're learning this game, however, it could take you several hours just to make it past the first world or the first biome. And this is a game, again, that you know very quickly if you want to keep playing this game. And as we can see, a lot of people said no. We went from 75%, and the tutorial is maybe like 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most if you're starting to play this game, to we go from 45 to 41. Now, I did get through the jungle, or I'm sorry, get through the mines. I don't think I would say it took me I did very fast, but I would say at least within an hour of playing this game, I did manage to get through the mines on my first attempt. For those of you watching this, live or recorded, how long did it take you to get through the first world? And if you didn't get through it, why did you stop playing? Because I'm just curious to see what was the reasoning. But for our purposes here and for rating this game in terms of churn and whatnot, it definitely had some issues. And we can certainly see that going from 75 to 41 to 23. So if we keep going down, again, we're looking to see when things stabilize. Go from 23 to 17, and stabilization occurs probably around when it's fewer or less than 6 to 7% drop off. So, unfortunately, we can't count Seen a Lot, because that is not a progression-based achievement. That is one that will just occur as you're naturally playing, and doesn't really fit with kind of where the placement in terms of its progression. So we can safely say, unfortunately, that it stabilized at 17.5, or we could round that up to 18%. So that gives us an 82% churn rate. And that is certainly not good. So 18 to 82. Like we've said, you want high stabilization and you want low churn. And what we've seen from a lot of very skill-intensive games is they're often not the best at bringing new players in or onboarding. The issue, just the same with Dark Souls, that the game expects you to be at this level to start with. And if you're not at that level, you are not going to be making progress in the slightest. And for a lot of people who play this game, they didn't quite want to get beyond that learning curve. Like I said, Spelunky is one of those games, because the difficulty is very subjective, that it's hard until it's not. But unlike, say, a game like Dark Souls, where you have other means of progress, if you're not good at blocking, just do lob dodging. If you're not good at dodging, do blocking. In this game, there really is no way around it. The items that you pick up in Spelunky, and by extension Spelunky 2, they don't make you a better player. They don't remove skill. They are basically there to help somebody who's already good. Like, when I played Spelunky 1 and 2, when I get really good items, that's not making me, or that's not going to let me win the game. That's going to let me crush the game. If you don't get those items, your chances of winning, or even just getting far, really lessen. Again, there are people who will probably beat, what was his name, Kunlun, without getting, a cape, a jetpack, or anything like that. But most people are going to need those items. Yeah. And to Mojo's comment, it's a very fine line you have to walk. If you're onboarding the player base, you have to assume people aren't the best at it. But if your game is already positioned to be on the difficult side, you could annoy people by saying, okay, you're an expert at this game, you still need to do easy, normal before you get to hard. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're seeing more developers embrace difficulty settings, assist modes, anything that can allow somebody to start things off a little bit easier. But at the same time, they're not solutions. They're not going to magically fix onboarding or approachability concerns like we've seen with several games we've played. So as we keep going down here with Spelunky, we go from 17 to 15. Now, these achievements, they are more the advanced stuff, and they're really in line with people trying to go for, not just beating the game, but going for hell and getting the quote-unquote true ending. Now, for our purposes, we are going to discuss that Made It is beating the game, which, again, it's very simple. Now, Iron Man, this is how most people do play through Spelunky. Start from Biome 1, get to the end, and in a lot of ways, if you're trying to really master this game, it does make it easier, because you get access to your items, you can start really getting through it. Now, of course, you can beat this game with simply just ropes and bombs alone. And I'm pretty sure there are people out there watching this, or probably not watching this, who did just that. So, we'll say that the game has a clear rate of 9%. Again, Iron Man difficulty is more the advanced side. And for those of you who have beaten Spelunky 1, did you beat it with shortcuts, or did you go the Iron Man route? I don't think I ever beat this game using shortcuts. I always just had to play it Iron Man style. But if we come over here, we will say that it has a clear rate of, and we'll round this up to be a little bit nicer. We'll round it up to 9%. So, with that said, however, 9 divided by 18... Well, that's very simple. It has a core base of 50%. Now again, these numbers are kind of skewed by the fact that there is so much churn to Spelunky 1. And this is something that's very important to understand why I want to do these shows. That we can say, and we go back here, that Spelunky 1 was a success. It had over 12,000 reviews. And I'm pretty sure several times more people actually bought this game. But if we take a look at Spelunky 2, will it have more or less? That is the question. Right now it's at less. Now keep in mind, of course, Spelunky 2 is only 1 year old versus 8. But I have a feeling that if we decide to look at Spelunky 2, let's say in a year or two from now, I don't know if that review score is going to be any higher or be dramatically higher than that. And the thing you have to understand, again, why it's important to understand player behavior, is that just because a lot of people bought your game, doesn't mean a lot of people actually played through your game. And we can certainly see this with Spelunky. Now, another factor that I want to mention that could be muddying these results is that I don't know if Spelunky originally launched with achievements. This is the same thing with Gone Home, which I know Gone Home certainly did not. Because it says that even I didn't beat that game, and I certainly did. But be that as it may, though, it doesn't erase the fact that people who kept playing Spelunky did not get as far into it. And this, again, is the thing you have to understand about games that have very niche or very challenging gameplay. That if you're not understanding why people quit your game, you are going to be making the same mistakes, or you're only going to be appealing to a smaller and smaller core group. So of the 18% that stood or stuck around with Spelunky, only half of that managed to actually clear the game. Now, with a game like this being so skill intensive, I'm sure that the 18% who did manage to get to the temple or get to the ice valley and are into this game, they probably still bought Spelunky 2 just to see what else there is to this game. Now we keep going down, and I can tell you right away, I did not play Spelunky 1 1,000 times. And the fact that 3.5% of the player base did is kind of surprising there. But of course, I had to beat Spelunky with Hell difficulty. And that is, of course, doing all the extra stuff. Hey, Smoke. Well, you missed about 20 minutes. I've been hanging in there, feeling a little tired and such, but hope you're doing well. But with Spelunky 1, I'm not sure if I ever did the Spelunky achievement. I'm going to check that on my own page really fast. No, I did not. I think I got the speedrun achievement for Spelunky 2. And I got big money and low score. Like, I love and hate that achievement in this game, because it sounds like it's going to be such an easy achievement to do, but it is a colossal pain to attempt this one on the game. And the big reason, of course, is that you can't pick up any treasure. So if something explodes and throws a gold bar your way and it hits you, there goes your entire run. And of course, if you try to do fighting, what was his name, Kalimba, or whatever the name of the boss was, and you blow up something and it just randomly hits you, your run ends like that. The 8-minute achievement is, again, very challenging and very tricky to do in this kind of game. It forces you to move as fast as you can and avoid, all the good stuff. You can't explore levels for additional bombs or rope. You really can't do the shop. And it is very much RNG dependent. If you can get a lucky cape or even climbing gloves, it makes your life so much easier to attempt that. But as we can see with Spelunky, that when you always have this high skill curve, or that skill wall, it's going to stop people from really getting into it. And I do wonder if there were ways to make this game more approachable. Probably, I would imagine if Spelunky 1 was released in today's market, it would have some kind of difficulty settings or difficulty modifiers, have additional lives. I could even imagine, and this is a question for everyone who plays Spelunky, if you think this would be a great or bad idea, if you could have infinite health mode in this game. Disable achievements if you would like, but basically be able to play Spelunky and not have to worry about dying. And I wonder if that would help people play this game all the way through. I'm very sure it would piss off every hardcore fan of the game at the same time. Kill the shopkeepers. Kill 12 or more. That is definitely a challenging one. The Sea of Gold is what you would also need to do for Hell. You can kind of track people trying to get to Hell. Getting the Ankh, going to the City of Gold, and then getting to Hell and back. And I've only managed a Hell run only once. And then once I got that, that was basically me throwing my hands up and saying, nope, I'm done. And I did make it to the final area of Spelunky 2. I've only attempted it one time. And I've just never had the energy or the commitment to do it a second time. And, yep, exactly, Smoke. And again, this is one of the reasons why it's important to understand this kind of stuff. We can assume very quickly that 25% of the people who bought Spelunky, they were never going to stick around for anything. Like, if you can't even beat the tutorial, you could have just gotten this game. I just wonder if Steam tracks people who got this from bundles, finagle, keys like that. Because I'm sure there are people who bought who got this game for free, loaded it up, tried to do one jump, realized it's not for them, and then never played this one again. But going from 75 to 41, that is very important to track. Because it's definitely telling us that a lot of people could not or would not get through the first world. And again, Spelunky is a game that you can die very quickly. I'm sure we all have those deaths of starting Spelunky, see spikes, fall on them, your run ends. And again, my favorite death in Spelunky 1 was throwing a rock at a wall, bounced back, hit me, knocked me off a ledge, and then I fell to my death. It would have been perfect if I would have fallen on spikes and got like a pit fatality. And when we eventually look at Spelunky 2, we can see again that there is a hardcore minority who love Spelunky, but that minority does not make up the majority of the fan base. And it is again why you have to be attentive to approachability. Because if you're dropping this amount of players within, again, maybe an hour to 2 hours of play, it's telling us that while there is a healthy fan base, that fan base is very small. And there's always ways that you can improve onboarding and approachability. Now, whether or not people will use them is another concern. But like I said, Spelunky was originally released, I think it was like 2008, 2009, maybe a little bit earlier than that. And then it was then remastered for the Xbox and PC and released in 2013. So design sensibilities have certainly changed. But with that said, I think we will switch over to Dead Cells. So I guess to sum things up, while Spelunky is a very skill-intensive game, it's a game that's very rewarding to play. The rewarding is very much on the intrinsic side. There's no persistent elements. There's no unlocks that change how you play. And this is why it's very subjective in terms of its difficulty. There are people who have probably been in Spelunky without picking up any items, without needing to do anything else to get at that level, and they found the game easy. Just as I'm sure there's tons and tons of people who never made it past the mines and think this is the hardest game ever made. And I am curious, I would love to know what the playtesting sessions were like for this game, and how did they decide just how easy or hard they wanted to make Spelunky, and how did that apply to Spelunky 2? So again, for those of you watching this recorded, if you did beat Spelunky, or if you did not, I'm curious, what are your overall thoughts on this game? And if you didn't beat this game, do you consider it to be a case of the game being bad, or the issue being on your side as to why you stopped playing? But with that, I'm going to reset the grade here. And we will get to Dead Cells. There we go. Alright. So, for our second game of our stream/show this week, we have Dead Cells. And as you can see, Dead Cells certainly has a lot of reviews. This is, of course, the breakout sensation from Motion Twin, who are making games for, I think, at least like 16, 17 years prior, before getting their first hit with this game. And Dead Cells is another title that really came out of nowhere for a lot of people, and won them over with its design, and just the amount of content in this game. Love the look of it, love the animations. Roguevania is another one right there. And Even this is not true anymore. There's so many more levels because of all the DLC. But if Spelunky is more on the extreme side of being an action roguelike, Dead Cells is very much its own unique beast. While it does have roguelike aspects to it, it definitely leans more on being roguelite. And even they... I mean, you can tell that they know what they're talking about in mentioning all the big names. And they were even inspired by Spelunky, apparently. And the game has had multiple expansions released. I don't know if I actually own all of these. But it is very much becoming it has become its own phenomenon. And surprisingly, we haven't seen too many games really get close to Dead Cells in terms of its approach. It's a game that really, you couldn't design this game, I think, by accident. You really need to understand and learn how a good Metroidvania works. How does a roguelike work? What is a roguelike? As we answered on another podcast. Now, with that said, I do have some issues that kept me from really playing this all the way through. But we'll see if the player base has those or if they push beyond it. So what I find very interesting, Dead Cells has far less churn than Spelunky 1 that we looked at in part 1. So getting through the opening of Dead Cells, reaching the promenade of the condemned, and this is something that's, again, very important to measure with this game, that Dead Cells, when you start playing it, is very linear in terms of how you get through it. Because of the fact that progression is tied, or permanent progression, is tied to these rooms, every player, when you start playing, is going to go in the order of Promenade of the Condemned, to the Ramparts, to the Black Bridge, then to the Village, and then I forget where the progression goes after that. It's only on multiple plays that you start getting access to more areas, going to the sewers, there's a prison, I think, and so on. And then this became even more muddied as the expansions were released that added in more levels that can take you through different paths. But this is a game that we can track kind of very easily how progression made it through, or how people got through this game. So we go from 93 to 89 to 83. And let's see, that's about 6. Well, actually, we'll go 89 to 84. This one does not count. We go to the Black Bridge. Beat the boss. And again, for the most part, while it is a little bit on the higher side in terms of churn, it is still very much stable. Go from 73 to 71. 71 to 60, however. Or actually, 71 to 67 to 60. So, it still is churning. 60% to 55, 55 to 54, 4 to 50. So we can say that safely wise, it did stabilize around this area. And again, we can't count achievements like open your first time door, unlock weapons, absorb a challenger rune, because those are not really the actual progression path. They're going to occur while you play the game and why so many people have them. But it doesn't really track in terms of going from beginning to end. So if we cut those out, we go from 93 to 89 to 83 to then 78, 73, What's kind of funny is it goes from 73 to 71. Like, I just wonder how many people just beat the concierge and then just stop playing entirely. They said, nope, we're done. So we go from 73 to 71. 67, but then we drop down to 60. And what is that? Stilt Village is definitely where the game spikes, especially for new players. This is where you run into those annoying cannon guys, the guys with the hooks. No, wait. The hooks come later. You run into the cannon guys, those annoying, like, rub enemies. And then you get to the clock tower. But then, as you can see, even though this was when we have our spike, going from 71 to 60, we only lost 3%. Where is it? Reach the clock room. Getting to the clock room. And then beating the timekeeper, we only lost a few more of that. So the game is definitely stabilizing. So we'll say then that goes from 60... 56. We'll say that stabilizes at 60%. So we 60% stable. And again, keep in mind that this is a roguelike or roguelite. So people who are dying, they are restarting the game and trying it again. And part of the charm of Dead Cells, and I think one of the reasons why it has less churn, or at least more consistent churn compared to Spelunky, is that there are options. There are things that you can do to make the runs easier, and why I think a lot of people have resonated with roguelite design as opposed to roguelike design. That with enough cells, you can get more healing, you unlock more weapons, you make the runs easier. Excuse me. I'm kind of surprised, in a good way, that a lot of people did make it to the first boss. Now, with that said, though, a little bit fewer actually beat the first fight. But again, though, getting from the village to the clock tower, we see this is probably, I think, the biggest spike that Dead Cells has. And to be really fair to this game, that is not the biggest spike we've seen, or the biggest drop-off we've seen games have when there's a difficulty spike. So even though it did lose about 11%, that it still kept people engaged. And again, I think this is a credit to the design of Dead Cells. While it is very skill intensive, it still has that wiggle room for player skill. If you're not good at this game, you will need to improve, but give yourself a really good weapon, get lifesteal, and get all your perks up, you're going to kick a lot of butt very easily. It won't help you when you get to the King's Hand, of course, but it will at least get you to progress. So again, we go from 54 to 50, 50 to 46. Now, again, this is where it gets a little weird in terms of these achievements. Because even though fewer people got to the Ancient Sewers, the Ancient Sewers occurs far earlier in a Dead Cells play. How I believe, if I remember right in terms of how you unlock it, once you get the Vine Room and then you restart your run, you should be able to access the Ancient Sewers through that. Oh, excuse me. So, again, it also begs the question of how many times did people restart or do a new run in Dead Cells? So my question for those of you watching this, for this part of our stream, if you stopped playing Dead Cells, how many runs did you play through before you raised the white flag? Because again, with games like Dead Cells and Spelunky, you're going to be replaying it kind of not by choice. You die, your run gets restarted. Now, surgical extraction, that I believe is getting your first boss cell. And yeah, I think so. So again, runes like the spider's rune, the teleporting rune, conjunctivitis, those are things that you're going to start seeing on your multiple plays of this game. Now I kind of lost it. I'm trying to see where the actual fight is. Now another thing that could be confusing, I'm pretty sure the achievements were unlocked in Dead Cells before the game was actually at 1.0. So this could also muddy in terms of where progress is. The graveyard is a second area, or a secondary area to get through. Some rest of the banish. Reach the corrupted prison. Oh yeah, the corrupted prison, that is a pain. Reach the derelict distillery, reach the nest. Now I know that I missed it. Where is... The throne room is not the end. There should be an achievement for beating the hand. There it is, right here. Sorry, I missed it with all the neon colors right there. So this is beating the game. If you can beat the hand of the king, you have officially beaten Dead Cells. Now, did you get all the way through this game? No, and that's where I'm going to talk about next. But we will say that it has a 38% clear rate, which, honestly, that is really good. Especially really good for a game that is on the harder side like this. So, if we do our fancy little math here for a second, we have a core base of 63%. That is quite phenomenal. This may be, like, for some of the more skill-intensive games that we've shown on the show, this may be one of the higher rates, despite the fact that it is so much on the harder side like this. And again, I think we can attribute this to the roguelite nature of it. At some point, I want to see if we can look at Rogue Legacy. I was debating looking at it this week, but I don't know if the achievements are really as concrete or as set up in a way that it allows us to really chart it as well as Dead Cells did. And even with that said, Dead Cells is not perfect. Because of the different routes and how you can get through it, it means that we can't really, give a definitive path. I think what we could say in terms of a path through the game, like looking at these names and kind of refreshing my memory, it goes Promenade of the Condemned, it goes Ramparts, Black Bridge, Stilt Village, Clock Tower, then I believe we go to the... No, definitely not this one. Reach the castle. Oh, I see. I think I confused these. That you go from the Timekeeper to either the Forgotten Spelunker or the Graveyard. Then you go to the castle. Then you go to the throne room. And then you, of course, beat the hand of the king, or you die horribly many, many times. Like I'm sure we've all done. But again, stuff like the Slumbering Sanctuary, Insufferable Crypt, Prison Depths, like these are where the game begins to get a little bit more wider in terms of its progress, and why fewer people have actually cleared it. And part of the beauty of Dead Cells, from a progression standpoint, is that the reason why you go to those secondary areas is not only do you find more runes, but you also get more blueprints. So by making it harder, you get cooler stuff. And of course, you can get the elite blueprints that can sometimes drop. But where the game, I think, loses people and where it lost me was with the boss cells. The boss cells in Dead Cells, they act as the game's New Game Plus, and then New Game Plus Plus, and then New Game Plus 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 Plus, and so on. But every time you put a boss cell on, it changes the game in ways that make it harder. Enemies that are higher class begin to show up in the earlier areas. But the thing that really kind of stopped my interest in Dead Cells was that it removed and reduced your ability to heal. When you get one boss cell on, it drops the max number of your Estus flask. When you get 2 on, I believe it reduces it down to a one-time consumable, kind of like that healing needle. And then when you get 3 on, it completely removes your actual healing. You cannot heal using those items. You either have to get the vampire skill, or you need to get lucky and find healing items. And for me, with a game that has such a high precision of Dead Cells, and why, any hit can just completely wreck you, that was kind of the step too far for me. And I just kind of lost the interest in playing the game. And then when you go further still, I believe it also starts introducing more of the curses that can really mess with you. So when we look at things beyond beating Dead Cells, so that will be putting on your soul, your first soul, keep going down, reach the morass. And the thing is that it's not giving you the names of these achievements because of the fact that I'm looking at this globally. If I were to go to my achievement page on Steam here and check the ones that I've gotten, it will tell me, absorb your second boss cell and so on. So this is getting your first boss cell. This is getting your second cell. And then as we keep going down, we get your third cell, get your fourth cell, you even get to 5. So 6.5% of the player base actually got through this game with every boss cell. And these ones, I'm not sure what they're for. I don't think I got them. Get down. They must be even harder boss cell variants. And now another thing to keep in mind is that there's a lot of achievements down here that are very low. And the reason is that these are achievements that were added with the DLCs. And like we saw or we witnessed when we reviewed Grim Dawn, that post-release content, post-game content like this, a lot of people will oftentimes skip. Because once you've been in the game, it's going to be hard to motivate a lot of people to say, well, we got more stuff, come back and play it. They'll say, I beat the game, I'm done. I don't need any more content. And when we get to this stuff, this is for the hardcore. And why, again, that the clear rates or the achievement rates continue to steadily go down. Now, what I find interesting is that even though this is still dropping as we will normally see, we're not seeing massive spikes. That it's still going down at a very consistent rate. So even though people aren't interested or they're just kind of dropping off, it does seem like the player base for the most part, is still trying. They still want to try and play this game. And again, I think that goes with just how well designed Dead Cells was. That it kept people motivating even if they're, getting frustrated, they stop playing. And again, I stopped playing this game right at this point. So I already beat the game several times over. And I felt that I got my money's worth out of it. And again, there will always be the super hardcore who they want to get everything. I don't know what this achievement is, but still, you had people who wanted to get it. And again, we can take some lessons between Dead Cells and Spelunky 1 in this respect. That Spelunky 1's difficulty is far more subjective than Dead Cells. You either have it or you don't. With Dead Cells, because of the roguelite aspects of it, it's not as skill intensive. Get really good items, get really good passives, and you can push through a lot of the game stiffly with it. Of course, if you're really great at this game, you can go far with basic weapons. And I believe I even got the achievement. Where is it? To beat the game with just your starting gear. Wow, it's a lot lower than I expected. It came from behind. Roses. Step on these. Yeah, I got this achievement. And I'm starting to think I may have gotten that one during the early access, when the game was far easier to play. Because I don't know how doable that is right now. I also ceremoniously got the achievement of dying because of the elevator. That's this one. Got crushed by the elevator, got an achievement for it. Ah. Oh, that's good. So, Dead Cells certainly did a fantastic job. And again, kind of the proof of that is with having such a high review score. And when we look at Slay the Spire at some point, we can also see just how much that game resonated. But I think it also goes to show, well, there's a little animation that's playing, it goes to show really how much roguelite and progression-based systems have really allowed games to be far more approachable than without them. I still don't know what's going on with this video because I don't have any sound on right now. But with progression like this, it does allow players to overcome things without needing skill. But with that skill, it allows them to progress far faster. And I've said this before with games like Dead Cells, Enter the Gungeon, and so on, that give me overpowered items, I will utterly break a lot of these games. Give me bad items, I can still put up a good fight. Now, for a lot of players, you give them bad items, they're going to lose the run. But with games like Dead Cells, there really isn't, the quote-unquote super build, because everything is given randomly. So you have to adapt, and the fact that every weapon there's so much variety in terms of the drops that you get in it, that it does make this game far more attractive to replay compared to a game that's more on the roguelike side. And again, with something like Spelunky, there really isn't a huge difference between runs. The levels change, but what you do in those levels don't. And honestly, that is also, I think, one of the fairer complaints of Dead Cells. Dead Cells focuses its procedural design and the variants on the items that you get, not on the world. Each biome is very fixed in terms of what can happen in it. So, on your 50th run through the ramparts or in the graveyard, it's not really changing. I think that's one of the few missteps that Dead Cells has. That it doesn't really have the biome variance that, say, the Biome Isaac did. And for a lot of people, if the moment-to-moment gameplay of Dead Cells started to frustrate or you got tired of it, you're not really going to find anything else that's going to motivate you to play. With one of the things I like about the Biome Isaac was that they introduced biome variants. So it's not just you can go to the basement, you can go to the flaming basement or the watery section or the spider basement, which I know everyone here really loves who play that game. And I would have liked to have seen more random elements that could show up in an individual biome. And again, so much of the core gameplay of Dead Cells really works. I mean, you can see these GIFs or these GIFs here, and there's just like so much like fun in terms of what is happening in them with setting up turrets, using the spear, that it does. But will you actually get good? That it does make each run feel different, and ultimately, I think when it comes to roguelike and roguelite's design, you want the player to feel like they are playing the game differently on each run. If all you're really giving them are very basic passives that change how you play or just give you slight bonuses, that's not creating variance. And I think Dead Cells gets it half right. Again, with a variety of items and builds that can happen, but not so much in the biomes themselves. Again, by the time I was like 20 runs going through the Ossuary or the Dark Spelunker, whatever it was called, I was kind of getting bored of the game. Now again though, this was after... What is my actual playtime on Dead Cells? About 50 hours of playing this game. So I definitely got my money's worth in it. Speaking of, what's my playtime in Gunfire? It's almost at the same amount, too. So again, you can see where roguelite aspects and progression can really push players to keep playing. It keeps them engaged. If your game doesn't have those elements and it's just the player having to get good, you're going to be losing far more players who couldn't make it to that level. And I believe that as we continue with the show, if we look at more roguelite games, you're going to see this consistency of having lower churn and higher stabilization compared to the games that are more roguelike that don't. But I think with that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to say about these two games this week. I think we are done. So again, to summarize with Dead Cells like I did with Spelunky, despite being on the harder side, the difficulty is kind of lessened or softened thanks to the roguelite elements of it. And the moment-to-moment of Dead Cells, again, you cannot discount how great game feel can help people push through issues. That if they're enjoying how the game is playing moment to moment, yes, they died, yes, they lost a run, but I'm still having fun, I'm going to keep playing it. Whereas in games where if the moment to moment is lacking, if it's cumbersome to play, if the controls don't feel right, people don't want to keep playing those games. And the fact that this was kind of like their first, I think, fully action-based game is certainly fascinating, that they got it all right with it. And again, Dead Cells also deserves praise for, I've heard, its amazing port to mobile. That playing this with a virtual controller or a virtual gamepad or whatever, that people still play Dead Cells, and they enjoyed it. And if you are watching this right now who did play Dead Cells predominantly on a mobile or a touchscreen based device, I'm curious if you really did enjoy it. Was it easy to play for you? Because the fact that you were able to do that shows some amazing UI UX work by Motion Twin. Now, of course, we recently played through Nuclear Blaze, the next game from the creator of Dead Cells, and it's nothing like this. But maybe we'll see a marriage between the two at some point in the future. But with that said, we're going to wrap up this week's show here. Thank you everybody for watching, whether you're enjoying this live or recorded. If you'd like to vote on future episodes, be sure to check out our Patreon, as well as our Discord, link down below. Do all the liking and subscribing. And I try to do these shows every Tuesday around 4 p.m. ET. And come back for game streams at 9 ET here on the Game Wisdom channel. So, with that said, have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys later.